Well, happy Monday. I was just finishing up a podcast. I've started a new podcast. I had an old podcast, well, still have it. Actually, I haven't completed it. A podcast called Next Level Physicians Thriving Outside the Box. And given the expansion of what I talk about, I decided to start a new podcast called Remap Your Mind. And just came off of coming off of a podcast recording with one Dr. Deza. She's actually here on Instagram. You can follow her. And so we had a very interesting conversation that I've had here about the strong Black woman narrative, but it began a new conversation, one that I was thinking about. Now I don't know how many of you, raise your hand if you agree with this, but many of my topics and ideas come as a result of long showers. So I like to call the shower deep thinking moments. Some people call the shower genius moments. And so I was thinking about, and I'm trying to remember how this thought came into my head about the system in which we exist. And, a lot of you know that I do anti-racism trainings, and I am really about empowering Black and brown people. And, I was thinking about the system, the overall system of oppression. And we have Dr. Joe Wiener and I have a training coming up this Wednesday, conscious anti-racism training. And I've been steeped inside of the symptoms of white supremacy, the characteristics and symptoms of white supremacy. And so, it's interesting when you look at some of these symptoms, and in my podcast, I may start to brief these, but when you look at these symptoms, these characteristics, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, like, okay, there's all these symptoms. It's a system. The system is set up in a particular way, and there are a lot of people out there who are working to shift the system from the DEI perspective, and also from the individual perspective, which is sort of, I have my foot in both ends of it, which is why I do what I do with neurolinguistic programming. Is I am focused on healing from the inside out, right? And so when I've been steeped inside of these symptoms or these characteristics of white supremacy culture, right? Culture, and how our system is set up. And I'm a physician, and so I also see it from the context of our medical system and how that produces inequity in healthcare. But it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And where I most hear it these days is in our own conversations, like day to day, professional Black and brown people, and perfectionism and individualism, and all of these various conversations, either or thinking. These are all characteristics and symptoms of white supremacy culture, right? And I talk about the culture because this is the institution in which we're set up. And you think about, when you think about all of the various institutions that are set up, that we're raised inside of, this is everywhere. So the question I ask myself in my shower deep thinking is, how can you be empowered inside of a system that is set up the way it is set up, and that will be inevitably slow to change? Because obviously the work is being done on a lot of fronts to raise awareness, to shift this type of thinking by a lot of people. And it wasn't built in a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. White supremacist culture didn't come up overnight. It's been in the works. So how do we become empowered inside of a system that's set up that it's going to be slow inevitably to change? And what came to me is this, can we exist inside the system? And we're going to go into this deeper in a moment, inside of any institution of religion, institution of education, institution of healthcare, the corporate institutions, and not be used by them, but be at the source of them. Like, can we use a system without being used by the system? And the answer is yes. So the question is to, as we look at, and I'm always saying the question is, because the way that this works is self-inquiry. Like I said, I'm about healing from the inside out. And when we look at our lives, I can't tell you how to do your life, right? I can't tell you what the solution is for your life. You're living your life. But what I can do is I can bring inquiry. I can bring inquiry that you can look at and begin to think about, well, how do I apply this in my life? And I can give you examples of how it has applied in my life and the people that I've coached and trained and done this deep personal work in. So hear me when I'm saying, when I'm always asking the question, when I'm always saying the question is for you to inquire. Because again, this is how we shift our lives, is to look ourselves, look at our own lives, look at where we can apply these principles, where we can notice and apply these principles in our own lives. So that's why I'm always saying the question is. A little sidebar there. So think about now. So for myself, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share about more of religion, and this is not a conversation about what's right and what's wrong in religion. It's just about my journey. So I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. I grew up in obviously this is the Bible Belt. I'm in Atlanta. I'm still in the Bible Belt, but I grew up in Huntsville. I grew up inside of the church, various denominations, Primitive Baptist, AME, and even for a moment Catholicism. And I grew up inside of these churches, not as a member, but my mom and we tended to go to these various churches. And one thing I noticed is that it was very difficult for me to connect with higher power inside of these churches, because I never understood the message, number one. And there was a lot of, there is, if you've ever been to a Baptist or Primitive Baptist church, sometimes there's a lot of shouting. And for me, that was scary as a child. And so I never really got that deep connection inside of as a child inside of the church. Now, I believed in God. I still do, as a matter of fact. And you'll hear me refer to God as higher power. Again, this is not a religious talk. This is just about a journey, right? And when I went to college, I was in the gospel choir. And I was one thing I always loved about church was the music. I was in the gospel choir, but one of the things I saw was there was some hypocrisy inside of the community where I was. And so it led me on this journey, because initially I was angry. I was like, bump this. I'm out, right? I'm done with Christianity. And I went on this journey. Now I have to say I've since come full circle and feel like that even though I don't subscribe to the dogma of a particular religion, I do respect various religion people who participate in their religions, because I feel like everybody has their pathway to get closer to higher power. However, it led me on this journey, and the journey to explore different religions, Yoruba and Islam and the Baha'i faith and Eastern philosophy, that is Taoism, that is Buddhism, and the different philosophies of Buddhism and Hinduism even, right? So I began to, and even Zoroastrianism, right? So I began to, read things like the Kabbalah and listen to the Dharma talks. And of course, I'm a yogi of 14 years. So there was, there's a lot of, forgive me, this word always eludes me, Bhagavita, in me as well. And Bhagavita. And so I went on this journey to explore the principles of these various religions and spiritual pathways. And what I found is the basic principles of these religions were all the same. The practices were different. So what I learned from that in my spiritual journey is that, so back to, I grew up inside the church, and there's this whole context of you need to be inside the church in order to be connected with the higher power. You need to be inside the institution of religion. And of course, in the Bible Belt, that's the way I was raised. And so I always had this pull, like, I should be going to church. I should be, right? I should be doing this. I should be doing that. We be shoulding all over ourselves, right? And there's some point in my life, I realized that I do not have to be inside of the institution of religion to benefit from the connection with higher power, right? I can take the principles from these various religions and create a practice of my own. So when I say, do we have to necessarily be inside the institution, or do we have to necessarily be used by the institution to benefit from the institution? The answer is no. And that's one example of that. Now, we can take education as an example as well, right? So I have been inside of the institution of education for many, many years. As a physician, I went to, of course, high school, undergraduate, graduate degree of psychology, went to med school, graduated, did my residency, which is continued training. And I've been inside of an institution for training, for education for many years. What I've learned is, from an educational standpoint, there are many ways that you can be educated, and that are all very valid without having to necessarily always be inside of an institution for education. And also, the institution of education will only get you so far, because in this culture of white supremacy, the education is limited to what his story is. His story, right? So we want to look at, well, how do we expand that? How do we be at the source? How do we be at the source of the being inside of an institution that doesn't necessarily give us everything that we need, and that's not set up necessarily for us, and so we, the question then becomes, in my own life, what are the institutions that I'm a part of, and am I being used by those institutions? And if I am, when I mean being used by, like inside of it, at the effect of the institution, when I say being used by, I mean at the effect. In neurolinguistic programming, there's a principle, cause and effect. It's an equation. Which side of the equation are you on in your life? Are you on the side that's the effect of the equation? That is, well, I hate to put it like this, but I will. Are you being a victim? Or are you at the effect? Are you at the effect of the circumstance? Are you being dragged by it? Or are you at the source of it? Are you putting yourself at the source? Like, how can you be empowered? Being at the source of the situation is what creates the condition of empowerment. Okay. So then when you look at, I'm speaking right now of the institution of education, and there's all kinds of institutions. There's the institution, there's the corporate institution. There's all types of institution. You can think of one yourself. You can put it in the comments. I can speak a bit about it, but I would, there's so many various institutions that exist inside of this culture that have been set up not necessarily for everyone who is inside of the institution. So then where will you put yourself at the source of utilizing the system and benefiting from that system rather than being used by that system? If you're inside the system, that is very slow to change. Where do you put yourself at the source of that? And one of the ways for me, the workforce is an institution, right? One of the ways for me was to come out of being an employee and even if I worked for someone else, one of the things that I did was I contracted. I became an independent contractor, and that gave me the steadiness until I built my own practice. It gave me the steadiness of a paycheck without having to be controlled by the entity that gave me that paycheck. right? So we call it in our industry locum tenens. In other industries, it may be called temp work. It maybe have other names. I don't know. But that's one way that I put myself at the source. Now, I'm not advocating anybody go and quit their job unless you have a plan, a financial plan that will bridge and take you to your next source of income, or you already have another source of income. But if you're giving yourself, if you're not giving yourself permission to be at the source of your life, or to utilize the various assets that you've acquired of these institutions for your benefit, for your expansion, for your empowerment, I'm giving you permission right now to do that. Look at all of the assets that you've acquired, and look at all the other sources outside of this particular institution that we've been brought up in, all the other assets that are in these other places where you can grab education, grab wisdom, grab sources of spirituality, resources, connection, that's going to actually feed you, nourish you. And inside of an institution or a system that's not all the way built for everyone. And then put yourself at the source of the equation and say, how then do I be empowered inside of a system, inside of an institution that wasn't built for me, that was built to empower other people? So I think that's the inquiry that I wanted to bring today. So again, it is an inquiry. There's no right answer. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I am here to give you things to think about, and look at how you can exist in an empowered state and make the most of your magic, because we all have magic. I mean, we all have magic. We all have gifts. We all have things to contribute to this world, and not all the time are those gifts acknowledged or recognized, and not all the time are you fully honoring your own gifts. And I think a lot of times it's because some of our passion has been drained out of us, beat out of us, however you want to put it. And so if you're looking for a space to reconnect with yourself, and then you might start with that. Start with knowing your own value. Start with knowing your own gifts, knowing who you are as a contribution, and understanding that you are inside of an institution or a system. This is a system that we are raised in, and unless you are white, then the system wasn't necessarily built for you. So we want to then look at how is it that we can be empowered and exist and empower and begin to dismantle and shift and change the system. But we know that this system is going to be slow to change. So then we need to be at the source of our own lives and the source of our own empowerment wherever we are, whether you're employed, whether you're in between jobs, whether you're an entrepreneur, moms and dads. How do we teach our children to be empowered inside of these systems, to advocate for self, to advocate for each other, to come back into community? How can we do that? And that's another thing, one of the things is I've been looking at the symptoms of white supremacy culture, individualism, and I am the only one, are characteristic that separate us. And it's time for us to really begin to come back to community, come back to the creating family units, even if they're not family of origin units. Family units as in like we used to grow, how I grew up, play family units, right? And so bringing back that community, bringing back that sense of I am my brother's keeper, bringing back that sense of unity amongst each other, and then looking at the solutions from that standpoint will help us to be empowered around a system that wasn't necessarily built for us. So that's the word for the day. And I hope you really got something from it. Go ahead and post it in the comments what you're taking away. I'd love to know. And also, it will inspire others who come behind you. All right. Tell me what you're taking away from the day for yourself, for your life, and how you plan to really look at how you set yourself up inside of a system, an institution that's going to be slow to change, to be empowered. How you can set yourself up to find ways to utilize the assets that you've gained from said institution or said system and utilize them to be empowered, empower yourself and others to do what works for you, to create a life you design, and how to create community inside of that. And we each one bring one, right? I know I say each one teach one. Yes. Each one reach one, teach one. Some say, I say, each one bring one. Let's bring each other wherever we're going and honor each other. So if you want to know more about what I'm doing in the space of healing, neurolinguistic programming, in the space of healing from the inside out, you can visit remapmymind.com, or you can just click the link in the bio. If you are interested in doing this deep work, doing some of that deep work to begin to dismantle some of the internalized intergenerational trauma that was installed or that you picked up along the way, you're welcome to schedule a call with me and or message me. The thing I most want you to know is that I think that in order for us to shift as a community and shift this narrative, we have to really start doing the work ourselves, the deep work ourselves. And I think that's important. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong at all. And I think we've had some experiences that sometimes can get in the way and can stop us from reaching our full potential and being our best selves. And some of that has to do with who we think we are inside of a system that wasn't necessarily built for us. And I think that's a conversation that's been ignored for a very long time. And I'm about unearthing things that no one likes to talk about. So let's get to work. Okay. So whether you're doing the work with me or whether you're doing the work with someone else, it doesn't matter who you're doing the work with, just do the work. And of course, if you want to engage with me, then you know what to do. You just send me a message or click the link in the bio, learn a little bit more about what I do with neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis and our trainings, because not only do I do the work individually with people, but I also train people in the technology of NLP and hypnosis. And I think it's important because it's about learning to listen and learning to be at the source of your language, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotion, and learning how to dismantle your own individual trauma and unresourceful thoughts and belief systems. Yeah. So you can create ones that really work for you in your life. So this Thursday, I'll be coming back on. And it's a conversation that I was actually supposed to have last week, but I'll be switching up my conversations because I think about things and I feel that they need to be talked about. So this Thursday, I'm going to be talking about code switching. I said I was going to do that last week, but I'm really going to do it this week. And we'll talk about code switching and whether it is, like how we use it. Is it a skill or is it a compensatory mechanism or is it a little bit of both? And again, we'll talk about being at the source of that. All right, you guys, have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday. And comment and let me know what you took from today and what you're going to be doing to get yourself on the cause or the source side of the equation. Have a great one. Peace.